Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change. And just getting some great comments and feedback and links lately. Thank you guys for continuing to send me really great links, really great information. I'm trying to actually just have the time to digest it and, put my eyes on all of it. But it's happening slowly but surely. I'm going to talk about one more thing in the Roger Allen video. And again, I forgot to link it last night because I did it right, late at night, right before I went to bed. I forgot to put it in there. It's in the previous video, but I will link it again in this video. One more point that I thought was interesting about that video that I'd like to talk about is the fact that he was talking about the study where some actors, they had some lines drawn on a board, of different lengths. And if you had enough people in the room saying that a shorter line length was the longest length, the person, they had actors, saying that, no, this is the longest line. And the person that was not an actor basically agreed with them. And that illustrates the power of not just the media, but of consensus of if everybody believes this one thing, then even if it's not true, then everybody else will believe it. And that doesn't just apply to climate change. That really, really applies to politics today. We really, the corporate media, the mainstream media has definite agendas, definite things that they want people to think, that they need people to believe. And so you get the manufacturing consent thing, right? If enough media outlets say, this thing is true, then and enough people see that and go, this thing is true because I saw it on TV. And and then you start calling people crazy or conspiracy theorists for not believing in this thing that they saw on TV, which everybody agrees with, right? It's really easy to become the, the lone sane person in the crowd of insane people. And the levels to which this is happening are astounding. I won't go into it at too much at length, but I would just like to say, again, we had the Trump Putin meeting, and which is, amazing in its own right, in the sense that some, it went outside of the lines of diplomatic decorum. And I thought that very interesting, honestly. I didn't, I didn't see it as everybody is just screaming their bloody heads off about treason and collusion and why didn't you take Putin to task and, et cetera, et cetera. You know why Trump didn't take Putin to task about meddling? Because there wasn't any meddling. You guys, there's no Russian meddling. That story is made up because Hillary lost the election and nobody thought that they were going to lose. Nobody thought she was going to lose to Trump. The mainstream media, the liberal left, Hillary supporters, the Democratic Party, and some very damning things came out about the Democratic Party in those emails. Some very damning things were overlooked in the Hillary Clinton campaign because the MSM, the FBI, the powers that be, the deep state, et cetera, were colluding to get her to be the president, to cover up her crimes, to let her skate, to squash all the things that were in those emails, which are very, very damning. We're not talking about the contents of those emails. Instead, we're talking about how those emails were retrieved and Russian meddling and how did, these hackers obviously got these emails. The point is not how the emails were gotten. The point is what is in those emails is insane. What is in those emails is so damning. Those things that are in those emails should be the things for which people are on trial. But the MSM, the liberal left, the mainstream consensus is that this happened because the MSM shouted so loudly, Russian collusion, Russian collusion, Russian collusion, Russian collusion. They shouted it so loudly that so many people agree with this story now that you're an insane person if you don't believe it. Well, I'm an insane person. I'm totally insane. I don't believe it. It didn't happen. It's not true. That's why Trump didn't say, what about this Russian meddling in the election? Because it didn't happen, because it's not true. I'm not, Trump, for whatever the hell is going on with the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency, all the other mayhem aside, I absolutely concur with the fact that this is bullshit. And he brought up some things in the meeting or in the press conference about the Awan brothers, which actually happened, which they have had, they've had hearings in Congress. They are going to trial. The Awan brothers are going to stand trial. And they called it a conspiracy theory. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's actually happening. The Awan brothers actually did the things that they have been accused of doing. They are, accused of doing these things, and is being brought to light. So, we have both sides, the right and the left, claiming, conspiracy, 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 and nobody knows what's true and what's not. Again and again, the mainstream media has had to walk back fake stories about, Russian meddling and about Russian hacking and cyber attacks and all this stuff. They walked it all back. Then I think it was a month or two ago that Mueller actually said out loud that Trump was not the focus of the investigation. So obviously the investigation is about Russian hacking, blah, 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 blah. I would be very, very surprised if they find anything, if anything really actually comes to fruition on this. It's weak sauce, as usual. But to just wrap up what I want to say about this, there is a clear case for communication and the idea of trying to encourage cooperation and denuclearization between superpowers that is so obvious. And yet the liberal left, the mainstream media, and everybody, a bunch of people on my Facebook timeline are just absolutely screaming their heads off about everything but the fact that, this is a good thing. This is a good step forward. This is the din of misinformation, the din of propaganda is at such deafening levels that nobody can actually, sift through it and look at, what are the facts? What's actually going on? What's going to happen? I don't know. I could go on and on, but I will not, because that's not the point of this channel. I will, though, however, read this article. I just want to segue into this article from July 17th from New Scientist. Trump's meeting with Putin may have had a surprise nuclear twist. Oh, didn't anybody see also this weird thing with Putin grabbing onto his chair when they were talking? He was like holding onto his chair in a really strange way. A lot of people are talking about what did that mean? There's widespread uproar today over yesterday's press conference between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump's apparent repudiation of his own intelligence agency finding of Russian Cyber interference in the American election was called bizarre, shameful, and disgraceful, even by politicians in Trump's own party. Let me just say right now that the former head of the CIA actually said they didn't have any evidence. It's been said numerous times, they didn't have any evidence. There was no concrete evidence. They don't have it. They're making it up over and over and over again. This is some made up shit. But people just go running through the streets with their pants on fire because, you know, oh my God, this must be true because of course it's true. Anyways, a former CIA director called the comments treasonous. But the press conference may have contained one ray of light. So let me just say, was it treasonous for John F. Kennedy to say that he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces? Was it possible that there was some link between John Kennedy's assassination and this statement? Anyways. But the press conference may have contained one ray of light. In a little notice remark, Putin said he gave Trump a note with a number of specific suggestions about disarmament. This includes the extension of the Strategic Offensive Arms Limitation Treaty. By this, he meant the 2010 New START agreement limiting the two countries to 1,550 warheads each. It expires in 2021, but has the option of being extended another 5 years. According to nuclear expert Joe Cirincione, a simple exchange of diplomatic notes between the parties could do it. Russia appears to have taken the first step. It's unclear how Trump responded to Putin, but at the press conference, he said, in terms of stopping nuclear proliferation, we have to do it. Ultimately, that's probably the most important thing that we can be working on. Right? That's a good thing, right? I don't know. I heard Trump actually utter the words, we both, you know, we have 90% of the nuclear weapons in the globe, and that's a negative, that's a bad thing. Meaning he recognizes that's a bad thing, that maybe we should do something about it. So at least encourage that process, my screamers of treason. Directly inspecting each other's weapons not only verifies compliance with the treaty, but it also vital for reducing military uncertainties between the two sides, making false alarms and accidental nuclear exchange less likely. Putin seemed to acknowledge this on Monday, calling on both sides to interact on the disarmament agenda, military and technical cooperation. Unfortunately, said Cirincione, Putin also appeared to link the extension of a New START with the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which limits each side's medium-range missiles. This treaty is also in limbo, with both sides accusing the others of violations. Putin also mentioned U.S. systems designed to shoot down incoming missiles, which Russia claims undermine nuclear deterrence and the agenda of non-placement of weapons in space. Trump has created a space force to address military issues in orbit. I'm afraid that the outlook is cloudy with the chance of nuclear rain if New START extension is indeed linked to a resolution on all these other issues, said Cirincione. He notes with concern that Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, who is ideologically opposed to arms treaties, stood outside the door as the two presidents met this week in Helsinki. At the end of the press conference, Putin handed Trump a souvenir football from the recent World Cup in Russia and said, the ball's in your court. And I don't know if you all remember way back in the Reagan-Gorbachev meetings, that Gorbachev was willing to destroy a large portion, if not all, of their nuclear arms if we agreed to do the same, and we did not agree. I mean, you know, we'll see how radical some kind of non-proliferation agreement, you know, how radical one that they actually agree to, you know, is, or if that can happen. But please, please, please stop encouraging this Red Scare, Cold War. Russia is out to get us at every turn, and they're, oh my God, please, please, liberal left, calm it the hell down and try and encourage negotiations, try and encourage nuclear non-proliferation, try and encourage, you know, anything that's a positive in light of all the, you know, all the negative that's going on, in light of all the negative that seems to be surrounding the Trump presidency, seems to be and is surrounding the Trump presidency. But yes, that's all I have to say on that. I'm going to move on to some climate change news. Starting off, wildfires rage in Arctic Circle as Sweden calls for help. Sweden worst hit as hot, dry summer sparks unusual number of fires, with at least 11 in the far north. Sweden worst hit as hot, dry summers, etc., etc. At least 11 wildfires are raging inside the Arctic Circle as the hot, dry summer turns an abnormally wide area of Europe into a tinderbox. The worst affected country, Sweden, has called for emergency assistance from its partners in the European Union to help fight the blazes, which have broken out across a wide range of its territory and prompted the evacuations of 4 communities. Tens of thousands of people have been warned to remain inside and close windows and vents to avoid smoke inhalation. Rail services have been disrupted. The Copernicus Earth Observation Program, which gives daily updates on fires in Europe, shows more than 60 fires burning across Sweden, with sites also ablaze in Norway, Finland, and Russia, including in the Arctic Circle. Norway has sent 6 firefighting helicopters in response to its neighbor's request for assistance. Italy is sending 2 Canadair CL-415s, which can dump 6,000 liters of water on each run, to Örebro in central southern Sweden. In western Sweden, firefighting operations were temporarily halted near an artillery training range near Alvdalen Forest due to concerns that unexploded ordnance might be detonated by the extreme heat. Residents in Uppsala said they could see the plumes of smoke and have been banned from barbecuing in national parks after 18 consecutive days without rain. This is definitely the worst year in recent times for forest fires. Whilst we get them every year, 2018 is shaping up to be excessive, said Mike Peacock, a university researcher and local resident. There have been huge fires in the past in Sweden, but not over such a wide area. This appears to be a trend as more and bigger blazes are reported in other far northern regions like Greenland, Alaska, Siberia, and Canada. The sparks come from a variety of sources: barbecue, cigarettes, and increasingly lightning, which is becoming more frequent as the planet warms. Swedish authorities say the risk of more fires in the days ahead is extremely high due to temperatures forecast in excess of 30 C. Much of the northern hemisphere has sweltered in unusually hot weather in recent weeks, breaking records from Algeria to California and causing fires from Siberia to Yorkshire. Ukraine has been hit especially hard by wildfires. The European Forest Fire Information System warned fire damage conditions were likely to be extreme across much of Central and Northern Europe in the coming weeks. EU officials said many of this year's fires are outside the traditional European fire zones of the Mediterranean, are increasingly taking place at unexpected times of year. 2017 was the worst fire year in Europe's history, causing destruction to thousands of hectares of forest and cropland in Portugal, Spain, and Italy as late as November. There are clear trends of longer fire seasons and frequent critical periods in Europe that are leading to dangerous fire situations, said a European Commission official. Climate scientists said the Arctic and other areas that were once relatively fire-free are likely to become more vulnerable. What we're seeing with this global heat wave is that these areas of fire susceptibility are now broadening, with the moors in northwest England and now these Swedish fires as a consequence of that, said Vincent Gauci, president of Global Change Ecology at the Open University. Both these areas are typically mild and wet, which allows forests and peatlands to develop quite large carbon stores. He added, when such carbon-dense ecosystems experience aridity and heat, and there is a source of ignition, lightning, or people, fires will happen. That is alarming. If you're not alarmed, I don't know what else to say. Canada's high Arctic glaciers at risk of disappearing. This is the next article. This is from yesterday. Satellite images show hundreds of glaciers shrinking as average annual temperatures rise 3.6 C in 70 years. Average annual temperatures rise rises 3.6 C in 70 years. Hundreds of glaciers in Canada's high Arctic are shrinking, and many are at risk of disappearing completely, an unprecedented inventory of glaciers in the country's northernmost island has revealed. Using satellite imagery, researchers cataloged more than 1,700 glaciers in northern Ellesmere Island and traced how they had changed between 1995 and 2015. The results offered a glimpse into how warming temperatures may be affecting ice in the region, from glaciers that sprawl across the land to the 200-meter thick ice shelves, said Adrian White, a glaciologist at the University of Ottawa. It's an area that's very difficult to study, said White. Logistically, it's very hard to get to, and even with satellite imagery. For the longest time, Google Earth didn't even have complete imagery. It was kind of the forgotten place. White's study, published last month in the Journal of Glaciology, found that the glaciers had shrunk by more than 1,700 square kilometers over a 16-year period, representing a loss of about 6%. A previous study of glaciers in the region, which used air photos and did not include ice shelves, showed a loss of 927 square kilometers between 1959 and 2000, hinting that the pace of loss may be increasing. Let's see, excuse me. Lost my darn place. Here we go. Of the 1,773 glaciers tracked by White, 1,353 were found to have shrunk significantly. A handful had disappeared altogether. What we found is a loss of 3 complete ice shelves, she said. In terms of glaciers that terminate on land, we've lost 3 small ice caps. None of the glaciers in the study showed any signs of growing. The findings echo the changes White has observed during her years of visiting the island. We see a lot more icebergs, said White. There was one continuous ice shelf. We now see individual icebergs broken up. We see a lot more crevasses. She attributed the findings to an increase in temperature. Canada's Arctic, one of the world's most glaciated regions, is warming at one of the fastest rates anywhere on Earth. In northern Ellesmere Island, the annual average temperature in the region increased by 3.6 C between 1948 and 2016. In particular, there seemed to be a shift in the mid-90s, she said, describing it as a sudden increase in warming that saw temperatures increase at about 0.78 C per decade between 1995 and 2016. These increases were greatest in autumn and winter, she said, so what you end up with is a lot more melt. While the most direct impact is rising sea levels, the melting ice also risks wiping out the region's unique ecosystems, such as the freshwater lakes that form when the water flowing off a glacier is trapped by a floating ice shelf. When the glaciers break away, all of a sudden there's nothing holding back these ecosystems that have been growing and developing for thousands of years, said White. And they're gone before we even have a chance to study them. Extrapolating from research done on glaciers from a neighboring island, White's study suggested that many of the glaciers on northern Ellesmere Island may not be high enough to accumulate enough snow to counter the pace at which they are melting. Without growth, the glacier is just in a state of loss, she said. It will disappear if climates don't change. Meaning revert to their old climate? I don't know. I'm going to say that's not going to happen. Moving on to the last article I want to cover. In India, India's summer heat may soon be literally unbearable. On a sweltering Wednesday in June, a rail-thin woman named Ramadi gripped the doctor's table with both hands. She could hardly hold herself upright. The pain in her stomach was so intense. She had traveled for 26 hours in a hot oven of a bus to visit her husband, a migrant worker here in the Indian capital. By the time she got here, the city was an oven too. 111 degrees Fahrenheit by lunchtime, and Ramadi was in an emergency room. The doctor, Reena Yadav, didn't know exactly what to make of Ramadi, what had made Ramadi sick, but it was clearly linked to the heat. Dr. Yadav suspected dehydration, possibly aggravated by fasting during Ramadan, or it could have been food poisoning, common in summer because food spoils quickly. Dr. Yadav put Ramadi, who was 31 and goes by one name, on a drip. She held her hand and told her she would be fine. Ramadi leaned over and retched. Extreme heat can kill, as it did by the dozens in Pakistan in May. But as many of South Asia's already scorching cities get even hotter, scientists and economists are warning of quieter, more far-reaching danger. Extreme heat is devastating the health and livelihoods of tens of millions more. If global greenhouse gas emissions continue at their current pace, they say heat and humidity levels could become unbearable, especially for the poor. It is already making them poorer and sicker, like the Kolkata street vendor who squats on his haunches from fatigue and nausea, like the woman who sells water to tourists in Delhi and passes out from heat stroke at least once each summer, like the women and men with fever and headaches who fill emergency rooms, like the outdoor workers who become so weak or sick that they routinely miss days of work and their daily wages. These cities are going to become unlivable unless urban governments put in systems of dealing with this phenomenon and make people aware, said Sujata Sanik, who served as a senior official in the Indian Ministry of Home Affairs and is now a fellow at the Harvard University School of Public Health. It's a major public health challenge. Indeed, a recent analysis of climate trends in several South Asia's biggest cities found that if current warming trends continue by the end of the century, wet bulb temperature is a measure of heat and humidity that can indicate the point when the body can no longer cool itself would be so high that people directly exposed for 6 hours or more would not survive. In many places, heat only magnifies the more thorny urban problems, including a shortage of basic services like electricity and water. For the country's National Disaster Management Agency, alarm bells rang after a heat wave struck the normally hot city of Ahmedabad in western India. In May 2010, temperatures soared to 118 degrees Fahrenheit or 48 Celsius. It resulted in a 43% increase in mortality compared to the same period in previous years, a study by public health researchers found. Since then, in some places, local governments, aided by the Natural Resources Defense Council and advocacy group, have put in place simple measures. In Ahmedabad, for instance, city-funded vans distribute free water during the hottest months. In the eastern coastal city of Bhubaneswar, parks are kept open in the afternoons so outdoor workers can sit in the shade. Occasionally, elected officials post heat safety tips on social media. Some cities that had felled trees for construction projects are busy trying to plant new ones. The science is unequivocally worrying. Across the region, a recent World Bank report concluded rising temperatures could diminish the living standards of 800 million people. How about more? More than that. I don't know if I'm going to read this whole thing because it's very, very long and it's kind of doing weird things on this. I pasted this article into a text file, but now it's the HTML kind of like screwed everything up. Worldwide, among the 100 most populous cities where summer highs are expected to reach at least 95 degrees Fahrenheit by 2050, according to estimates by the Urban Climate Change Research Network, 24 are in India. Rohit Mohapatra, Deputy Director of Integrated Research for Action and Development, is trying to help the capital, Delhi, develop a plan to respond to the new danger. The first step is to quantify its human toll. Heat goes unreported and underreported. They take it for granted, Mr. Mohapatra said. It's a silent killer. On a blistering Wednesday morning with the heat index at 111 degrees Fahrenheit, he and a team of survey takers snaked through the lanes of a working-class neighborhood in central Delhi. They measured temperature and humidity inside the brick and tin apartments. They spoke to residents about how the heat affects them. Only by 4 a.m. when it cools down can we sleep, a woman named Kamal told him. Her husband, a day laborer, suffered heat stroke this year, missed a week's work and with it, a week's pay. The shopkeeper named Mohammed Naeem said that while he managed to stay cool in his ground floor space, his father's blood pressure rose every summer as he sweltered in their top floor apartment all day. Through the narrow lanes all morning, young men hauled stacks of paper to a printing plant that operated on the ground floor of one house. A tailor sat cross-legged on the floor, stitching lining into a man's suit. A curtain of flies hung in the air. A woman named Abida told Mr. Magacho that she helped her husband cope during the summer by stocking glucose tablets in her home at all times. Her husband works as a house painter. Even when he is nauseous and dizzy in the heat, he goes to work, she said. He can't afford not to. That's all I'm going to read of this article. I'm going to link it below. You know, this is obviously going to ramp up and ramp up much more quickly than, say, 2050 or 2100, of course. Who knows how quickly, but we will see in the coming months and years. And to go back to what I was saying in the first part of this video, I would caution people to run with I would caution people to run with MSM created ideas and stories and intrigue, lest you run into a wall later on. This is actually right now helping Trump, all this stuff, this outrage, this calls for treason, all this, all this like bombast that's going on in the media. This is helping Trump. It's helping Trump. His supporters are getting, are growing. They're they're becoming increasingly defensive, and they're not. I don't think that we're seeing his base erode like the left likes to think that they are. I don't think that that's happening, honestly. The more the MSM comes after him with bullshit and lies, the more he is going to become stronger. The more likely we are going to see Trump succeed in 2020 and becoming president again. And if you really don't want that to happen, it really might be best to look at other things other than vilifying him constantly day in and day out. If that's your only platform, if that's the only thing that you're mad about, if that's, if your whole mindset in life is, screw Trump and, oh my God, we must get rid of Trump, you're not going to get very far. We need to actually have, what is going to take his place. And we're in this predicament because we have corporate Democrats that basically sold us out and have been selling us out. And there's just no left anymore. There's no left. There's only right and centrist right, kind of right. And that's why we're in this predicament right now. So let's start looking at what the left needs to do in order to counter this, not just say no, or let's call Trump a traitor, or let's, respond to every single tweet every single day. Let's start talking about things that matter, things that matter to people. Climate change probably being the major topic that we should be talking about on the left, or anywhere, on alternative news, mainstream news. People need to know what's going on, because they will hide it until the very end, and it just can't be good for anybody. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.